Hi, Louisiana Commonweal here. I'm sure by now that everyone is familiar with the flurry of secession petitions that were posted on whitehouse.gov in the wake of Obama's re-election. And now in recent weeks it appears that the issue has once again been resurrected with attempts by several counties in northern Colorado, both northern as well as southern California, and a few counties in western Maryland to secede from the largely Democrat-controlled, their respective, largely Democrat-controlled state governments and form new Republican states, as well as shifting the balance of power in the Senate favoring the GOP. Now, whenever the issue of secession pops up, the secession proponents are usually stereotyped as being crazed, far-right, reactionary kooks who just don't like Democrats or minorities. And to a large extent, that's true. And as for my own view, I don't think that it's a good idea to just up and secede whenever you lose an election. And so something like this only makes them look like crybabies, and now it's all sour grapes, and frankly it's indicative of the fact that they really don't seem to have much respect for the democratic process. Now, all that said, that doesn't mean I'm against the idea of state secession. In fact, by and large, I think the more decentralization, the better. I'd be especially in favor of breaking up some of the larger states like California and Texas, as well as all of the other swing states, and decreasing their share of congressional representation and electoral votes as a way of making the other states a bit more equal in terms of federal representation. Moreover, I'd be in favor of states seceding even from the Union. Now, personally, to that end, I don't personally accept this oft-repeated objection to secession, the argument that no state could exist economically on its own, that it would wind up as, an impoverished third world backwater. I think it's a rather knee-jerk, intellectually lazy knee-jerk reaction to secession, because if you look at the GDP of each state, to varying degrees, a state could conceivably exist on its own, as most states are on par with countries that are pretty well off. And of course, some states would be better off than others. That is, so long as they can at least keep up funding for their vital infrastructure. So in a broad sense, I don't think, that would really be an issue in terms of how well states would do on their own without the federal government. Now, as far as my own state is concerned, I would absolutely be in favor of Louisiana seceding and becoming an independent republic, but only under several very important preconditions, namely implementing a Swiss-style healthcare model, a distributed economic system whereby a larger percentage of the population would have a greater share of ownership in production. That would actually be the most important prerequisite for independence. I think we should go with a semi-presidential system like most of the other Francophone countries, and also enact a number of safeguards in the electoral system as a way to ensure that we have multi-party politics, preventing our political system from coalescing into just two parties like the United States. So those are just a few important things that we need to consider in order to establish a country that's worth living in. And that's a really important point that I'm trying to get across, because it's all fine and well if every state in the Union were to secede, but unless certain safeguards are taken into account, i.e., let's form a new country where we have democratic controls over economic and financial institutions, let's decentralize healthcare, let's not have a two-party system. To do otherwise, we'd wind up with 50 separate microcosms of the same problem that we had in the first place, and we're right back to square one. Now, what do I think is the likelihood of actually seeing secession as a real mainstream political movement? I think we very well may see it come from the southern Republican states. I think the GOP sees the writing on the wall I think they know they're pretty much done as a national party. And as time goes by, they're going to see their share of the vote become smaller and smaller, but still reign supreme on the state level until, as an act of pure self-preservation, clinging onto whatever it is they have left, they'll have no choice but to secede and form a single-party, socially conservative country that's primarily centered around the Sun Belt. And I know that there could conceivably be a lot of real support for that among the voters. And if there was a concerted effort to do so, I could absolutely see secession happen. So final thoughts on this. What I would ideally like to see is for the United States to go back to something like the Articles of Confederation or the New Jersey Plan, where rather than having a national government, the Union would function as an economic and defensive alliance among 50 independent republics, whereby the states would have to follow certain rules in interacting with one another. And also the federal authorities should enforce certain civil rights codes, as well as other things that would prevent the states from screwing people over internally. And don't get me wrong, I'm not some states' rights fanatic. Let's be real. In a lot of ways, the states aren't really that much better than the federal government. In fact, in many cases, they can be worse. But my point is that if there was ever a real movement to abolish the federal government, I think it could conceivably help in some ways, but from my perspective, it isn't the end-all, be-all solution that would solve everything, as a lot of libertarians tend to believe. But nevertheless, I would get on board with it. So those are my thoughts. I hope they were fairly coherent. And I hope somebody gets something out of is somewhat edified from this. So, see you soon.